Bill and Ben are tank engine twins. Each has 4 wheels, a tiny chimney and dome, and a small squat cab. Their trucks are filled with china clay. It is needed for pottery, paper, paint, and many other things. The twins are now kept busy pulling the trucks for engines on the main line and for ships in the harbour. One morning, they arranged some trucks and went away for more. They returned to find them all gone. The twins were most surprised. Their drivers examined a patch of oil. "That's a diesel," they said. "It's a wattle?" asked Bill. "A diesel, I think," replied Ben. "There's a notice about them in our shed. Coughs and sneezels spread diseases. You had a cough in your smoke box yesterday. It's your fault the diesel came." "It isn't, it is." "Stop arguing, you two," laughed their drivers. "Let's go and rescue our trucks." Bill and Ben were horrified. "But the diesel will magic us away like the trucks." "He won't magic us," replied their drivers.
Thomas.
"We'll more
We'll
likely
soon have you
magic
back
him."
on the rails. They
"Listen,
laughed.
he doesn't know you're twins, so we'll take away your names and numbers,
Don't
and
fash
then
yourself,
this is what
Thomas.
we'll do."
We'll soon have you back on the rails.
He boasted to the others. Puffing driver says I don't need him now. "Don't be so daft," snorted Percy. "I'd never go without my driver," said Toby earnestly. "I'd be frightened." "Huh," boasted Thomas. "I'm not scared." "You'd never dare." "I would then. You'll see." The next morning the firelighter came. Thomas drowsed comfortably as the warmth spread through his boiler. Percy and Toby were still asleep. Thomas suddenly remembered. "Silly stick in the muds," he chuckled. "I'll show them. Driver said I could manage without him. I'll just go out. Then I'll stop and wheesh. That'll make them jump." Thomas thought he was being clever. Really, he was only moving because a careless cleaner had meddled with his controls. He soon found his mistake. He tried to wheesh, but he couldn't. He tried to stop, but he couldn't. He just kept rolling along. Thomas was looking at the board. Didn't dare look at... "Danger! We mustn't go past it," he said. "That's orders." "Why?" "Danger means falling down something," said Thomas. "I went past danger once and fell down a mine." "I can't see a mine," said Percy. He didn't know that the foundations of the quay had sunk. The rails now sloped downward to the sea. "Stupid board," said Percy. Percy made a plan. One day he whispered to the trucks, "Will you give me a bump when we get to the quay?" The trucks had never been asked to bump an engine before. They giggled and chatted about it. "Driver doesn't know my plan," chuckled Percy. On, laughed the trucks. Percy thought they were helping. "I'll pretend to stop at the station, but the trucks will push me past the board. Then I'll make them stop. I can do that whenever I like." Every wise engine knows that you cannot trust. James's driver and fireman could not make him move. The other engines grumbled dreadfully. They had to do James's work as well as their own. At last the inspector arrived. "Show a wheel, James. You can't stay here all day." "The fat controller told me to stay here. He sent a message this morning." "He did not. How could he? He's away for a week." "Oh," said James. "Oh, where's Percy?" Percy had wisely disappeared. When the fat controller came back, he did see James and Percy too. Both engines wished he hadn't. One morning, Percy was careless. "I say, you engines,
I'm to take some trucks to Thomas's junction. The Fat Controller chose me especially. He must know I'm a really useful engine. More likely he wants you out the way, grunted James.
Gordon looked across to James. They were making a plan.
James and I
When they
were just...
reached the harbour, they found everything in confusion. Trucks had been derailed, blocking the line, and stone slabs lay everywhere.
We must get these pilings past, said Thomas's driver. They are essential. Trevor, we need you to drag them round this mess. Just the sort of job I like, replied Trevor. Now you'll see, Thomas. I'll soon show you what traction engines can do. Trevor was as good as his word.
He dragged the pilings clear with chains and towed them into position. Who needs rails? He muttered cheerfully to himself.
Later, Thomas brought Annie and Clarabelle to visit him. Thomas was most impressed.
Now I understand how useful a traction engine can be. Percy found Toby at the quarry. I say, Toby, that Harold, that stuck-up whirlybird thing, says I'm slow and out of date. Just let him wait. I'll show him. He collected his trucks and started off, still fuming. Soon they heard a familiar buzzing. Percy, whispered his driver, there's Harold. He's not far ahead. Let's race him. Yes, let's, said Percy. Percy pounded along. The truck screamed and swayed. Well, I'll be a ding-dong-dang, said the driver. There was Harold. The race was on. Go it, Percy, he yelled. You're gaining. Percy had never been allowed to run fast before. He was having the time of his life. Hurry, 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 he panted to the trucks. We don't want to, they grumbled. It was no use. Percy was bucketing along with flying wheels, and Harold was high and alongside. The fireman shoveled for dear life. Well done, Percy, shouted the driver. We're gaining. We're going ahead.
Hey, Percy, out.
Good.
Hey, Percy, out.
Come along, puffed Percy. No nonsense. We'll give him nonsense, giggled the trucks. But they followed so quietly that Percy thought they were under control. Suddenly, they saw a notice ahead. All trains stop to pin down brakes. Beep, beep, beep. Brakes, guard, please. But before he could check them, the truck surged forward. On, they cried. Help, help, whistled Percy. The man on duty at the crossing rushed to warn traffic with his red flag, but was too late to switch Percy to the runaway siding. Frantically trying to grip the rails, Percy slid into the yard. Beep, beep, look out! The brake van was in smithereens. This is better, said Daisy. But whatever is that rubbish? The rubbish turned out to be Annie, Clarabelle, and Henrietta, who were most offended. We won't stay here to be insulted, they fumed. Percy and Toby had to take them away and spend half the night soothing their hurt feelings. The engines woke next morning feeling exhausted. Daisy, on the other hand, felt bright and cheerful. Ooh, ooh, she tooted as she came out of the yard and back to the station.
Look at me, she purred to the passengers. I'm the latest diesel, highly sprung and right up to date. You won't want Thomas's bumpy old Annie and Clarabelle now. The passengers waited for Daisy to start, but she didn't. She saw that a milk van was about to be coupled to her and was most indignant. Do they expect me to pull that? Surely, said her driver, you can pull one van. I won't, said Daisy. Percy can do it. He loves messing about with trucks. She began to shudder violently. Nonsense, said her driver. Come on now, back down. Daisy lurched backwards. She was so cross that she blew a fuse. Told you, she said, and stopped. Everyone argued with her, but it was no use. It's fitter's orders, she said. What is? My fitters.
When Thomas came back, Annie and Clarabelle told him how well Duck had managed. Thomas was so pleased to be home that he soon forgot to be jealous. The works had left Thomas's handbrake very stiff. It made his brakes seem as if they were hard on, when in fact they were not. As a result, he and his coaches often overran the platform. Thomas found this most embarrassing. Gradually, his driver and fireman learned to be extra careful. But one day, Thomas's fireman was ill, and a relief man took his place. The fireman had fastened the coupling and joined the driver and station master on the platform to wait for Henry's passengers. The fireman had forgotten all about Thomas's handbrake. Thomas simmered happily. Not long now, he thought, as he saw Henry slowly approaching. But Thomas's brakes were not hard on, and suddenly he felt his wheels begin to move. He tried to stop, but he couldn't without his driver and fireman. He tried to whistle a warning, but he couldn't do that either. The guard, driver, fireman, and passengers were all stranded on the platform. Stop! Stop! His driver laughed. Neither do I. It was a pretend ghost on television. Percy was disappointed. That evening, he came back from the harbour. Percy knew where he was, even in the dark. Crow's Farm Crossing. We shan't be long now. He liked running at night. The rails hummed and the signal lights shone green. But a broken cartload of lime lay ahead. Sam the farmer had just gone for help. Percy broke the cart to smithereens. Lime flew everywhere. He puffed quickly to the nearest signal box. Percy's driver explained what had happened. "I'll see to it," said the signalman, "but you'd better clean Percy, or people will think he's a ghost." Percy chuckled. "Do let's pretend I'm a ghost and scare Thomas. That'll teach him to say I'm a silly little engine." Toby promised to help. Thomas was being oiled up for his evening train. No, Percy's had an
Donald
accident,
and Douglas were
cried
used
Toby.
to it.
Poor
Coupled back
engines.
to back, with a van between their tenders and a snowplow on their fronts, they set to work. They puffed backwards and forwards, patrolling the line. Generally, the snow slipped away easily, but sometimes they found deeper drifts. Presently, they came to a drift which was larger than most. They charged it, and were just backing for another try when... "Lush sakes, Donald! It's Henry! Dinna fess yourself, Henry! Wait a while. We'll have you out. Henry was very grateful. He saw all was not well. The twins were glum. They told him that the Fat Controller was returning soon. He'll send us back for sure. It's a shame, said Percy. A lot of nonsense about a broken signal box, grumbled Gordon. That spiteful brake van too, put in James. Good riddance, that's what I say. They were splendid in the snow, added Henry. It isn't fair. They all agreed that something must be done, but none knew what. They screamed. So Percy decided to talk to Edward about it. What you need, said Edward, is a deputation. He explained what that was. Percy ran back quickly. Trucks lighted to show off. Edward says we need a demonstration of... When Duck returned, Diesel was trying to take some trucks from a siding. They were old and empty. They had not been touched for a long time. Diesel found them hard to move. Pull! Push! Backwards! Forward! Oh! Oh! The trucks groaned. We can't! We won't! Duck watched with interest. Diesel lost patience. He roared, gave a great heave. The trucks geared forward. Oh! They screamed, we can't, we won't. Some of their brakes snapped, and the gear jammed in the sleepers. Chuckled Duck. Diesel recovered and tried to push the trucks back, but they wouldn't move. Duck ran quietly round to collect the other trucks. Thank you for arranging these, Diesel.
Green caterpillar indeed,
Don't you want
fumed
this
Percy.
He set off to collect some hay to take to the harbour. Everyone says I'm handsome, or at least nearly everyone. Anyway, my curves are better than Thomas's corners. Thomas says I'm always late, he grumbled. I'm never late, or at least only a few minutes. What's that to Thomas? He can always catch up time further on. All the same, he and his driver decided to start home early. Then came trouble. A crate of treacle was upset all over Percy. Percy was cross. He was still sticky when he puffed away. The wind was blowing fiercely. Look at that! Exclaimed the driver. The wind caught the piled hay, tossing it up and over the track. The lion climbed here. Take a run at it, Percy, his driver advised. Percy gathered speed, but the hay made the rails slippery, and his wheels wouldn't grip. Time after time he stalled with spinning wheels, and had to wait till the line ahead was cleared before he could start again. Everyone was waiting. Thomas seethed in patience. Despicable, said Henry. We cannot allow it. They consulted together. Yes, they said. He did it to us. We'll do it to him and see how he likes it. Duck was tired out. The trucks had been cheeky and troublesome. He wanted a rest in the shed. The three engines barred his way. Hurrah, 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 laughed the trucks. We've broken away, we've broken away. Chase him, bump him, throw him off the rails, they yelled. Hurry, Duck, hurry, said the driver. They raced through Edward Station, but the trucks were catching up as fast as we can. Then they'll catch us gradually. The driver was gaining control. Another clear mile and we'll do it. Oh, glory, look at that! James was just pulling out on their line from the station ahead. Any minute there could be a crash. It's up to you now, Duck, cried the driver. Duck put every ounce of weight and steam against the trucks. It's too late, Duck groaned and shut his eyes. He veered into a siding where a barber had set up shop. He was shaving a customer.
The silly trucks had knocked their guard off his van and left him far behind after he had whistled a warning.
Had to take great care when crossing.
But the trucks didn't care. They were
Thomas grew crosser and crosser. Time's time, he grumbled. Why should I keep my passengers waiting while Henry and James dawdle about all day on viaducts? Don't blame me, snorted Henry. If we hurried across the viaduct, it might collapse, and then you'd have no passengers at all. What would you do then? Run my train on time, for one thing, retorted Thomas. He hurried away before Henry could answer. Bertie was impatient too. He was timed to arrive just after Thomas. His passengers found that instead of going straight from the bus to their train, they were kept waiting till Thomas arrived. Soon Bertie grew cross with Thomas.
Late again, he remarked, as Thomas panted wearily in.
We may be friends, but I thought you could go fast, Thomas. It's time we had another race. I reckon I could beat you now. Thomas let off steam loudly. Rubbish, he hissed fiercely. It's those mainline engines. They dither about on the viaduct and then blame the fat controller's workmen. It's just an excuse for laziness, if you ask me.
himself. Percy said
One day,
more.
James
He
was
just
later
grinned
than ever
and
at
told
the
me.
junction.
Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. A large hopper was loading his trucks full of coal. Thomas was still being cheeky.
Careful, he warned.
Watch out with those silly trucks. Go on, go on, go on, muttered the trucks.
And by the way, went on Thomas, those buffers don't look very safe to me. The last load poured down.
Help! I'm choking!
Cried Thomas.
Get me out! Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smoke box to bunker. Ha ha, chuckled Percy. You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful. I'm not disgraceful, choked Thomas. You did that on purpose. Get me out. It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't in time for his next train.
I am disappointed, Donald. I did not expect such, clumsiness from you. I had decided to send Douglas back and keep you,
I'm sorry, sir.
said Donald. I should think so too. You have upset my arrangements. Now James will have to help with the goods work, while you have your tender mended. James won't like that. The fat controller was right. James grumbled dreadfully. Anyone would think, said Douglas, that Donald had his accident on purpose. I heard tell about an engine and some tar wagons. Shut up, said James. It's not funny. He didn't like to be reminded of his own accident. Well,
drift was deeper
said
than the
Douglas.
rest.
Hush, said Donald. I can hear something. Probably the wind, said Douglas. Help! No, listen, insisted Donald. Over here. Look, it's Thomas. Come on. The poor wee engine must be frozen to the frames in there. When the workmen arrived, it took some time to decide how to dig away the heavy drifts of snow.
Thomas's driver and fireman, who had taken shelter at a nearby cottage, joined the rescue. At last, Thomas and the precious Christmas tree were freed from the snowdrift. Then they set off once more to finish their long journey. The Fat Controller greeted them warmly. As a reward for all your hard work, you may go and enjoy the carols. Be quick now. At the big station, all was soon ready. 1, 2, 3. Suddenly, like magic, the station was flooded with lights. Ladies, gentlemen, and children, I give you 3 cheers for Thomas the Tank Engine and all his friends who have made this occasion possible. Wind and rain buffeted Edward. His sanding gear failed, and his fireman rode in front, dropping sand on the rails by hand. Suddenly, Edward's wheels slipped fiercely. With a shrieking crack, something broke. The crew inspected the damage. Repairs took some time. "One of your crank pins broke, Edward," said his driver. "We've taken your side rods off. Now you're like an old-fashioned engine. Can you get these people home? They must start back tonight." "I'll try, sir," promised Edward. Edward puffed and pulled his hardest, but his wheels kept slipping and he could not start the heavy train. The passengers were anxious.
Said Bertie.
Driver, fireman, and guard went along the train, making adjustments between the
I'll catch
coaches.
Edward or bust, said Bertie.
"We've loosened the couplings. Oh, my gears and axles," he groaned, toiling up the hill. "I'll never be the same bus again." "Hooray, hooray, I see him," cheered Bertie as he reached the top. "Oh, no, Edward's at the station." "No, he stopped at a crossing." "Hooray, hooray!" Bertie tore down the hill. "Well done, Bertie," shouted his passengers. "Go it!" Bertie skidded into the yard. "Wait, wait!" cried Bertie. He was just in time to see Edward puff away. "I'm sorry," said Bertie. "Never mind," said the passengers. "After him quickly. 3rd time lucky, you know. Do you think we'll catch him at the next station, driver?" "There's a good chance," replied the driver. "Our road keeps close to the line and we can climb hills better than Edward. I'll just make sure." He spoke to the station master. Bertie and the passengers waited impatiently. "Yes, we'll do it this time," said the driver. "Hooray!" called the passengers, as Bertie chased after Edward once more. Set off for the station. "Broken up? What a shame. Broken up? What a shame. I must help Trevor, I must." He thought of all his friends who liked engines, but strangely none of them would have room for a traction engine at home. It's a shame, he hissed. Then, beep, beep! Why didn't I think of him before? There, on the platform, was the very person. "Hello, Edward. You look upset. What's the matter, Charlie?" he asked the driver. "There's a traction engine in the scrapyard, Vicar. He'll be broken up next week. Jem Cole says he never drove a better engine. Do save him, sir. He saws wood and gives children rides." "We'll see," replied the vicar. Jem Cole came on Saturday. "The Reverend's coming to see you, Trevor. Maybe he'll buy you." "Do you think he will?" asked Trevor hopefully. "He will when I've lit your fire and cleaned you up." The vicar and his 2 boys arrived that evening. Trevor hadn't felt so happy for months. He chuffered about the yard. Edward, show your paces, Trevor. Clanked. The trucks rattled and screamed. Some cows were grazing nearby. They were not used to trains. The noise and smoke disturbed them. As Edward clanked by, they broke through the fence and ran across the line. A coupling was broken, and some trucks were left behind. Edward felt a jerk, but didn't take much notice. He was used to trucks. Bother those trucks, he thought. Why can't they come quietly? He was at the next station before either he or his driver realized what had happened. When Gordon and Henry heard about the accident, they laughed and boasted. Fancy allowing cows to break his train. They wouldn't dare do that to us. We'd show them. Toby was cross. You couldn't help it, Edward. They've never met cows. I have, and I know the trouble they are. Some days later, Gordon rushed through Edward's station. Hoop, hoop, mind the cows. Hurry, 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 puffed Gordon. Don't make such a fuss. Don't make such a fuss, grumbled his coaches.
Didn't know how. And Toby would help.
Long stretch of
yes,
line
sir.
lay.
Thank you, sir.
The new engine arrived. What's your name? Asked the Fat Controller. Montague, sir, but I'm usually called Duck.
They say I waddle. I don't really, sir, but I like Duck better than Montague.
Good. Duck it shall be. Here, Percy, show Duck round. The two engines went off together. Soon they were very busy. James, Gordon, and Henry watched Duck quietly doing his work. He seems a simple sort of engine.
We'll have some fun and order him about. Smoke billowed everywhere.
Percy was cross. Duck was panting up behind with every ounce of steam he had. At last he caught up with James.
Steady, Edward, called his driver. The inspector stood on Edward's front, holding a noose of rope in the crook of the shunter's pole. He was trying to slip it over James's buffer.
The engine swayed and lurched. At last! Got him! He shouted. He pulled the noose tight. Gently braking, Edward's driver checked the engine's speed, and James's fireman scrambled across and took control.
So the old iron caught you after all, chuckled Edward. I am sorry, whispered James. Thank you for saving me. You were splendid, Edward. That's all right, replied Edward.
The engines arrived at the station side by side. The Fat Controller was waiting. A fine piece of work, he said. James, you can rest and then take your train. I'm proud of you, Edward. You shall go to the works and have your worn parts mended.
Oh, thank you, sir, said Edward.
It'll be lovely not to clank